Now, this week the House of Commons approved its last final report on Partygate, adding to the conclusion that Boris Johnson had lied to Parliament, that his allies tried to intimidate committee members investigating him. Has Boris Johnson changed the rules of what's acceptable in British politics?
Well, I hope not. I hope the fact that he's been basically completely trashed by this report. The report has found clearly, as you say, that he lied to Parliament, which is a kind of cardinal sin in our politics. One worry I have is the fact that the current Prime Minister, his successor Rishi Sunak, has barely said a word about it. So Sunak was very happy to come out and talk about alleged cheating by your cricket team, but has said next to nothing about Boris Johnson lying to Parliament. So he's only changed the rules if people let him change the rules, and provided that Parliament stands up for itself and makes clear that there is no place for Boris Johnson in future in public life, then I think we may learn from something from this.
Now, post-truth politics is a central part of the book that you've written, and also a theme of the podcast, the very successful podcast that you have in the UK. Now, in the modern world, it can be said to have started with the big lies of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, all the way to Trump and Putin. I just wonder how much easier it is now to perpetrate a big lie in the age of social media.
I think social media has made it easier, but I think also in our country we have a problem with what you'd call the mainstream media. A lot of our newspapers and broadcasters as well, I'm afraid, a lot of them don't really see their job as speaking truth to power. They ventilate a lot of the lies. I mean, you know, here we are 7 years after Brexit, and you pick up several of our newspapers and they're still telling you that Brexit is going really, really well, and that if there are any problems in the economy, they've got nothing to do with Brexit. So that's a big lie. And Brexit itself, we've talked about Johnson, Brexit was led by a liar, the campaign was led by a liar, it was won on a series of big lies, and yet we're still kind of paddling along with the idea that it's all going fine. You mentioned post-truth. I talk about the 3 Ps in the book: populism, polarisation and post-truth. They go together and they become a very toxic but highly effective vehicle for campaigning. We saw it in your country with Morrison. We've seen it here with Johnson and the Tories and with Brexit. We've seen it in America with Trump. And even though Trump was beaten, you know, the guy is still on the block.
Come back to Brexit for a minute. Now, polls tell us that in the UK, young people were overwhelmingly opposed to Brexit at the time. How can they find inspiration in a Labour leader then, Keir Starmer, who won't commit to holding a referendum to try and reverse the Brexit decision?
Well, that is a very, very good question. Look, the answer is they have to try and, you know, put pressure on the Labour Party. I don't think that even I'm a kind of, you know, pretty fanatical anti-Brexiteer. But even I would say I understand why Keir Starmer doesn't want to put Brexit centre stage at the next general election. But the fact is it has gone wrong, and a lot of the consequences are going to have to be addressed by a new government if we get one. So Labour have to address those problems, even if they don't want to say they're doing it as a way of putting Brexit centre stage. But young people have to keep fighting for what they believe in. And the whole purpose of the book is to say you have agency provided you use that agency.
Well, what you've said is that the country is crying out for the prospect that change can come, and you say that it can be genuinely transformational, but this is very difficult when people are so cynical about politics. I know you have been talking to a lot of young people about the ideas that you raise on the podcast and this new book. What do they tell you about their belief in that possibility for change?
Well, some of them do believe it, and but a lot. You use the word cynicism. A lot of them, I think, just look at politics and think it's got nothing to do with me, and that's a real problem. Because if you look at I think this will be the same in Australia. It's the same in every continent in the world. The tenth of the population which is least likely to vote is the youngest. Now, I'm arguing actually it should be the opposite. It should be young people who are taking control of politics right now. And the other worrying thing is that it's also in that young decile, the younger generation, where there is a greater propensity to think that, you know what, maybe authoritarianism isn't as bad as we keep being told. So there is a kind of battle for democracy going in here. On the one hand, young people are probably more socially conscious than they've ever been, but at the same time, they look at politics and think, I'm not sure that's the way to do it. Now, I'm trying to persuade them that provided they all understand the need to get engaged and do get engaged in a meaningful way, not just by sitting on their sofa tweeting, or signing petitions, that has a place in politics, but actually get out and doing stuff.
Now, that what can I do question, of course, is especially critical in US politics right now, where there is effectively a gerontocracy at the top. How would you inspire engagement for young people in US politics who face the prospect of a presidential election, a repeat of a battle between two older men?
The answer to your question is actually to make sure that people understand just how dangerous, not just to America, but to the world, the return of Donald Trump would be. I write, I quote in the book Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State in the States, and she wrote a brilliant book shortly before she died, Fascism, A Warning. And I just think it's about really, facing people up to the responsibility they have in deciding who the next president of America is.
Now, just to come back to Australia and the UK for the moment, there's been a lot of exchanges over the years between Australian and British politicians. I think Sunak's chief strategist at the moment is an Australian. And the Sunak government is currently running an immigration policy, borrowing a well-known slogan in Australia, Stop the Boats. Is Australian politics a good influence in UK political life?
Well, I think parts of it are. I mentioned Rishi Sunak earlier in terms of I don't have a clear sense of what he's trying to do with the country. So I think what's happened is that somebody like Levido, who's one of Linton Crosby's sidekicks, comes in, becomes very powerful within the number 10 system. And I think I hope, is going to prove that you should never fight the last battle. And, it's interesting to me that why don't they look at what happened to Scott Morrison? OK, he won, but where is he now? He's out, and I'd say he's pretty discredited around the world because he was an absolute flag waver for this whole populist approach to politics. So I think that somebody like Crosby and Levido, I don't think are a good influence on our politics. I hope in a way they do continue to advise the Conservatives because I don't think they're doing a very good job of it. And this Stop the Boats thing, if you really, we've got a debate going on at the moment where the immigration minister has ordered the painting over of Mickey Mouse murals in an asylum detention centre, reception centre, because he thinks it's too welcoming for children who go in there. Now, if you seriously think that is the way to try to get people to support you when your economy is tanking, when you're riddled with politicians who just scandal attaches to them every step they walk, I think they're just wrong. And I hope that, I hope I'm right and I hope they're wrong, but I think actually they're part of the problem.
Alistair Campbell, thank you very much indeed for joining us.